The Sonic series has been making what some might call a little bit of a comeback in recent years. The series has gone from multiple large failures in a row to consistent new games that are all pretty well received. But out of this new era of Sonic games we have found ourselves in, there was one that had a more mixed to bad response, and that was Sonic Superstars. Superstars is yet another return to the classic style Sonic game, which as we've seen can either go really well or also go really bad. The main thing that sets this game apart from the other classic Sonic revivals to me though, is that instead of being made by fan developers or a smaller studio that had some prior experience with the series, this game was made by Arzest. Now most people would hear the name Arzest and immediately think of nothing because they probably have never heard of Arzest, but more dignified people, like me, are immediately reminded of some absolute banger video games like Hey Pikmin and Balan Wonderworld. But more notable than all of that is the fact that this studio was created by the original character designer of Sonic the Hedgehog. This game aimed to do what no other classic Sonic revival had ever tried, and that was to get the guy who made Sonic. Not that guy who made Sonic. He did it insider trading, and he also made a Balan Wonderworld. The other guy only did one of those things, so he gets to make Sonic again. So yeah, this game was made by a studio that doesn't have the best track record, and also most people would say that this game added on to their bad track record. Apparently the president of Sega also thinks that. But not me though. I think this game is good. If Oshima did insider trading, I'd let him off the hook. Sonic Superstars starts off on the right foot, with the game instantly letting you know that the controls and physics feel good and the levels are actually designed. I'm not going to claim that this game feels one-to-one with Mania or any of the other classic games in terms of the physics, but it felt similar enough that I didn't notice any particular differences. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all play pretty much the same as how they do in Mania, which is good. That means I think it's good. Amy is also a new character here, and she kind of just feels like Sonic with a double jump and worse drop dash. Speaking of the drop dash, I feel like the guy on the Sonic Mania dev team who came up with that really needs to get royalties or something, because I swear they have literally put it in every single Sonic game since Mania. They even put it on modern Sonic and Sonic Generations, even though there's literally no use for that move in those levels. This game also put a big focus on the new co-op mode, and I'll be honest, I haven't really tried it. I probably could get some friends to play it with me if I wanted, but I'll be honest, multiplayer Sonic doesn't really sound all that fun. In all the footage I've seen of this game being played in multiplayer, it's just one guy running really fast ahead of everyone else while they can't keep up and have to keep getting teleported back on screen every few milliseconds. Like, I'm glad they didn't compromise the level design for this gimmick, but also Sonic level design just doesn't really work for co-op nearly as well as something a bit more slowly paced like Mario does. But speaking of the levels, those are for the most part done pretty well in this game. I'm not gonna say this is anything on the level of Mania because that game has some levels that make me wet myself, but there are some really solid ones here. The first zone is honestly a really good encapsulation of what this game does right. It's fun to play through, offers a decent mix of speed and platforming, and then throws in some level gimmicks to spice things up. Honestly, the level gimmicks are something I thought this game did really well. Most zones in this game have some unique mechanic or gameplay element that distinguishes them from the others without completely overshadowing the main gameplay. I'm not going to say that there weren't any missteps here though, like we're really doing the darkness thing from Sonic 4 again. That's really what you're going with. I think the cracks start to show a lot more in the later zones where we start to see a lot more this. You get a lot more instant kill crushing things and bottomless pits, which isn't too bad or anything, but I think the earlier zones in the game just do a better job of balancing the difficulty and keeping things fun. Speaking of keeping things fun, the boss fights do not do that very well. It's no secret that the boss fights in this game are generally sorta kinda hated by all. Conceptually, most of them aren't bad, but the main thing that separates them from the other classic Sonic games is that you can only hit them at very specific points and they just spend most of the fight completely invulnerable to damage. It not only makes the bosses less fun, but also, since they are attached to the end of the levels, they really stretch out the length of them. I generally think that if you're gonna make bosses this long, that's fine, but you should probably just make them separate from the normal levels. That way the levels flow a little better and it would just feel more reasonable that the boss fights would take this long. As for the reason they decided to make the bosses invulnerable for like 90% of the fight, most people just attribute it to the fact that this game has multiplayer, and if all the players could just spam hit the bosses together, it would make all of the bosses a complete cakewalk. And while I do think that probably is the main reason, after playing this game again, I think there might actually be one other reason. In Sonic Superstars, as you collect the Chaos Emeralds, you gain a new power with each one. These can range from being super useful abilities that can change the way you play the game, to the Vine one. I originally kind of just ignored these when the game first came out, and I do kind of think I was wrong to do that. Yeah, sure, some of them are completely useless, but the ones that are useful, like Bullet, are genuinely fun to use, and can help with certain parts of the game that I found frustrating. Like the bosses. Only downside to these new Chaos Emerald abilities is that the special stages are some of the worst in the series. You can't aim where you're going at all, so you're basically just having to rely on the game to point your camera in the right direction, which it never does. Also, the swinging feels bad. 2 out of 10. It's even crazier because the other special stages that are strictly a bonus for having a certain amount of rings at a checkpoint are honestly better. And these are like Sonic 1 style special stages, which usually suck, but here I found them actually kind of enjoyable. But back to what we were talking about, when actually taking advantage of these new abilities, the bosses still weren't perfect, but they did in general become a lot more bearable. Now imagine being able to use these abilities and you can just hit the boss over and over again like you can in other Sonic games. You would be able to melt through these guys in a split second. This isn't a defense of that decision, by the way. I think they should just let me speed through the bosses. This is a Sonic game. Most of these bosses are designed well, but that one little decision can just kind of make them unbearable. Except for that Fang boss, I think the best thing to do with that one is just to delete any and all files related to it. That final boss for the main story is a little rough too. Not as bad as I remember though. One thing I do genuinely appreciate a lot about Sonic Superstars though is just the fact that it's a Sonic game with all new level themes. Some of them certainly can be reminiscent of some other zones, but for the most part, each zone looks pretty original to this game, and that's just kinda nice to see. While for the most part, I do think that Sonic Mania is definitely the better game, one problem I do kind of have with it is just how much of that game's identity is just sort of stripped from the other classic Sonic games. It makes sense in the context of what Mania is and is trying to be, but still, when every other Sonic game releasing around you is also reusing Green Hill and Chemical Plant, it makes it a little annoying to see it once again. Superstars, though, was able to feel pretty original. When I'm playing this game, I'm not constantly thinking of other games. Since it does so much of its own original stuff, it kind of makes it easier to think of this game as its own thing. And maybe that's why I'm a lot less harsh on it than other people are. I also do just like how this game looks in general. The art style kind of reminds me of Sonic Lost World in a way, but in a way that I think it looks a lot better than Sonic Lost World did. And maybe it's because they got the guy who literally designed Sonic working on this game, but that Sonic design is on point. Of all the modern renditions of classic Sonic, I think this is easily my favorite one. All the other characters look good too, I just care about Sonic more, so bleh. After getting through the main campaign, you unlock a new mode called Trip's Story. I forgot, there's a new character and her name is Trip. Okay, I've covered all my bases now. This mode basically just acts as a hard mode, with all of the levels having been changed up to both be more difficult and also incorporate Trip's abilities. I've always been a plain Sonic kind of guy when it comes to classic Sonic games, but I did actually find Trip to be quite fun to play as. She gets both a double jump and a wall climb, which makes her pretty versatile while also not feeling super overpowered or anything. And with how the levels are changed up to utilize her moveset a bit more, there are a ton of sections where you're just jumping between walls and onto the ceiling and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. But because this is a hard mode, a lot of the annoying sections from the main game are kinda just made more annoying, and the bosses that were bad are now just insufferable. Most of them I was able to cheese through using the emerald abilities or just going into Trip's super form, which looks like this, and that's pretty funny. But man, that final boss, oh, that final boss. What makes me the most mad about it is that it's almost fun. They almost got it right. But then they put in these stupid instant kill attacks that wipe you out even if you have rings, which means that one small slip up will cause you to have to restart the whole like 5 to 10 minute boss fight. Look, I like this game. I'm making this whole video to say that this game is better than people say. This boss alone makes me want to unsay anything nice I've said. Oh, yay, hooray, fan favorite character Fang is back, who's been in like none games before this. I'm so excited for both of his insufferable boss fights. Did I mention that I like Trip's design? She's pretty cool. They should put her in Crossworlds. Actually, never mind, they're probably too busy making like a Forrest Gump DLC pack or something. There is one more true final boss after beating Trip's story, which I totally got to and didn't rage quit the Fang boss. If I'm being honest, there's no real reason to not just play up to the point where you get to these bosses and then just not fight the bosses, which totally isn't what I did. I mean, there aren't any new levels or anything after these, and it's not like I played a Sonic game for the good boss fights. There's like one Sonic game with fun boss fights. Most of the bosses aren't great, but they are at least bearable. But man, these final ones are just not really worth it, and kind of a slap in the face at the end of a game that I overall think is pretty decent. I know I got a bit negative at the end there because they just so happened to put the worst parts of the game at the end, but I do genuinely like this game and think it gets way overhated. Yeah, sure, it's not perfect, not as good as Sonic Mania, but I think it still stands out on its own as a cool little game. It definitely sucks that some of those bosses are there, but I also think it's kind of unfair to let that overshadow the fact that it also has some pretty fun levels. Try playing this game in time trial mode, it literally just gets rid of the game's worst aspect. Sonic Superstars is a fun platformer that I enjoy, and that's all I really need it to be. It's better than Sonic Frontiers.